Good morning. Good morning, morning. Today's
Morning.
Sunday, June 25th, first Sunday of summer. Let's, as we do every week, let's start by making aspirations, set our intentions by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So we're going to spend a little extra time on questions today, and topics, and stuff to talk about from your side, from your point of view, your request. Well, we're going to meditate first. Also, we're going to read an email from one of you. I'm not going to share the name of the person because I don't know if they want that, but this is an email from one of our fellow students in the class. I thought I would share with you something that made me realize that I must be making some progress on this path, and that saying the four immeasurables every day is having a positive effect. I'm a Manchester United fan, and on Saturday, it's a couple of Saturdays ago, actually, our rivals, Manchester City, had the opportunity to win the treble, which is 3 special matches, which has only ever been done once before, and that was by Manchester United, my team. Normally, I would be supporting the other team and hope that Manchester City would lose. But just before the game started, I felt that I wanted the Man City fans to feel as happy as I had back when we won the treble. This really took me by surprise, and I messaged a Man City fan I know who I hadn't seen for years to tell them. When City did win, I felt happy for them. This might not seem very significant, but knowing how I would normally react, I felt it was. First of all, thank you for sharing that. And when we got that email, Victoria and I felt that it was important to share it with you, because that's a real practical application of meditation, these aspirations and intentions that we set, and practice. Like we say very often in this class, practice is not just when we're on the cushion in front of our shrine, when we're not meditating. It's taking what we're cultivating, the mindfulness and the awareness that we cultivate here, and bringing it into our daily life in things that are very, often when we talk about topics or when people ask questions, they're always very big occurrences, really difficult obstacles, really difficult people in our lives, the government passing laws against, all of which are very important and do have very big effect on us. But it's also in the very subtle, moment to moment, daily things of our lives where the work equally needs to be done equally, because if you can apply it in very subtle moments and very seemingly mundane moments, seemingly very daily, routine moments, the big ones will follow suit, because the big ones, our awareness, can get triggered really quickly because the emotions are so big. So we know, we know it's an afflictive emotion. We know it's something that's really causing us strife. So we might more easily have that impulse to lean on our practice. But it's in the subtle, day-to-day little things, like rooting for your home team. Not saying that you shouldn't root for your home team, and that's not what this person is saying either. It was just an example of a moment where, because of this person's practice, they became aware of another way to look at things, a bigger picture, a different point of view, a shift in perspective. And we felt it was really important to share that with you. And if you want to do it today, in lieu of questions, if you want to share any more examples of that, that's really cool. But we were really happy to get that email. And if you want to, anyone else want to do this via email, it's Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 at Gmail. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was incredibly happy when Michael read the email, because that's really practice working. It means practice is integrated into our mind stream, because practice is like air. We should never be separated from it. And instead of having a habitual response of being angry, of being jealous, of being competitive, this huge change, it seems like not such a big event in one's life, but it actually is gigantic, because it signifies that practice is really taking root in one's mind. And for you, the person who wrote this email, you should really rejoice, because you have been able to actually, you wrote to us because you knew that your ordinary response was substituted by practice. Now awareness is actually working, it's taking root, it's changing your responses. You were able to remove affliction and have happiness and rejoice for others. The affliction would have been the ordinary response, habitual response, something that we are accustomed to living most of our lives. And so, and it's huge when practice is actually taking root in our mind. It's always huge. There's nothing insignificant, no matter how small a deed is, like rejoicing for someone. uh, there's nothing insignificant about it. It's actually very important. And thank you for sharing this, because this is really practice at work. It means that whatever we're doing as a group is actually taking root and is actually changing things on a very fundamental level. And I wanted to read a couple of verses from this is Jigten Sumgon. He is the founder of our lineage, uh, um, Drikung Kagyu lineage, to which we belong. We actually go back, the lineages all go back to the Buddha and Buddha's enlightenment, but in that lineage there have been many Buddhas, all of whom have attained full enlightenment. And Buddha is not a name of a person or a name of a sect or a name of a religion or a name of a group or something. Buddha is like, let's say, if you have a flower in its bud form or in its seed form, what we call the path is going from the little seed to the little stalk to the little closed, bud. And Buddha is the blossoming of the flower. So that, uh, if you take that in terms of awareness, Buddha is a culmination of awareness. And so there have been many masters whose awareness has culminated in the ultimate finding the ground of awareness and staying in it through these kinds of acts, like what you wrote to us, through awareness. And there's no small act of awareness when awareness is actually present. When we change the normal habitual ego grasping to being able to rejoice for others, one of the four immeasurables, which is actually one of the most difficult ones, because that particular immeasurable, rejoicing for others' happiness, it has to do with our stinginess, has to do with our jealousy. And cutting that, because it's so subtle, cutting the root of jealousy, cutting the root of stinginess, not being able to rejoice for others, but rather, fall into the habitual pattern of being jealous, competitive, and being stingy, is huge. And so I wanted to read from Jigten Sumgon the four lines that speak to the blossoming of the four immeasurables and to the blossoming of awareness, which is what we call the Buddha. Buddha, the word Buddha means just awakened. Um, and any one of us, and actually all of us, will become awakened, because we all have Buddha nature. And Buddha nature is the basis on which awakening will happen. There will come a time when we're not wandering in samsara because of our grasping and addiction to afflictive emotions and ignorance. We will awaken. You know, for some of us it'll be longer, for some of us it'll be shorter, but you know, the awakening happens on the basis of having the Buddha nature. Just like a seed will blossom when all the conditions come together, when the seed is placed into the soil, when there is sun, there's water, there's the right kind of temperature, you know, when that care of secondary conditions, when everything comes together. That's what karma means. When all the conditions come together, the seed blossoms. But in this case, you know, Lord Jigten Sumgon is speaking about, uh, it's called the 9 verses on view, meditation, conduct, and fruition that do not need to be looked for elsewhere. I have now understood the unceasing stream of thoughts to be primordial awareness. There is no need to look for a view elsewhere. That means that if we're watching our mind, we take our ordinary thoughts as clouds in the sky of our vast awareness. We connect to awareness. We do not grasp to the thoughts, but we see the arising as movement of the mind, and we let awareness simply be. I have now understood the undistracted ordinary mind to be meditation. There is no need to look for experience elsewhere. Just like the student who wrote that email, you were in the flow of meditation when you realized that you can have reactions and allowing experience and meditation to be in the moment. So you were able to experience the rejoicing as opposed to grasping and affliction. So that is meditation. Undistracted ordinary mind is meditation. When our awareness is present all the time, our habitual things no longer are the response to everything. You know, when thoughts arise, we let them arise. And when we glance on them out of the spaciousness of the mind, that is meditation. And so, of course, the result is different. There is no need to look for experience elsewhere. I have now understood my own mind that I have never parted from to be the Buddha. There is no need to look for fruition anywhere. The blossoming, the Buddhahood, will happen gradually by mind looking at the movement of the mind. When appearances arise, we respond to them out of that space of awareness that is meditation. So the result, or what is called the fruition, will naturally be that of bodhicitta mind, mind of enlightenment. And little by little, all of the movement, all of the arising of appearances and our experience of them will become this uninterrupted stream of meditation. And eventually there will not be unvirtuous actions because the mind will be seeing it from the spaciousness and luminosity of its own ground. And, you know, affliction will eventually leave us. That will lead to complete Buddhahood. There is no other place for the mind to go. And this is the summary. Where there is no grasping, meaning grasping to thoughts, afflictions, and ego, when there is no grasping, this is the view, because that means that ignorance is not present in the ground. When there's no distraction, meaning that we look at the movement of the mind from the space of awareness that is empty, open, constantly present. When we are more on the side of our awareness at large in the sense of its nature, just shedding light on everything that we see, this is meditation. When there is no distraction, this is meditation. When there is no clinging, I am right, he is wrong, me, this, identifying subject and object, always on the side of ignorance. When there is no clinging, and meaning that we are no longer hijacked by the little thoughts and the movement, but we stay on the side of awareness at large, this is conduct, because then we know naturally the right behavior arises, like that email that you wrote, and thank you for that. When there is no wish, meaning we're not trapped between desire for this outcome and rejection for that outcome, when we're not trapped between hope and fear, we're not clinging to these two opposite forces of ignorance. When there is no wish, this is the fruition. It means the mind is liberated, and we will certainly reach the ground of Buddhahood.
And remember, on a very mundane level, we're not saying Buddha didn't say it's bad to root for your home team. If you and Buddhism is not about Buddha said this is right and this is wrong and this. We're talking about working with our mind. It's a lot of fun to go to a game and root for your team. It's a pleasurable thing. It's a fun thing. But you see how easily that can turn into violent. How often is the opposing fans, beating each other, or attacking a referee. I mean, some games have ended in the murder of a referee or another player. That's actually happened. So, those emotions, which can be very fun and wholesome, can easily, if they're given free rein, can turn into extremely destructive things. So it's not about that being wrong. What we're saying is our fellow student is looking at their mind and where they're grasping and where they're clinging and seeing another point of view. Okay, I'm rooting for my team. I'm having fun. My team lost. I don't want to beat up the person on the other side of the bar because they support the other team that beat my team. I just can have, oh, that's nice that they're feeling happy. I felt that happiness and I rejoice in that. That's what this is about.
And that's what practice is. There is no right and wrong. Those are just labels. That's how when the awareness is lost in those labels. And when we label certain things in a certain way, the sticky emotional content comes to grasp and to attach to that. From that arise the afflictive responses. Those afflictive responses in turn churn and create negative karma. So being open, being present. If your team won, you rejoice, but you also have an understanding for the other team who lost, and you make an expression, may you be happy and have the causes of happiness, may you win, in the future and have that happiness. It's not about competitiveness, it's not about pitting one against another. It's about being aware that there's no room for arising based on this is like this, that is like this is good, this is bad. It's being aware and not allowing the mind stream to be polluted by negative afflictive emotions that are caused by ignorance. So neither ignorance nor the afflictions that are uh, 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 co-emergent together with that ignorance. That is what meditation is. That is what freedom is. And that is, the mind of the four immeasurables is.
With that in mind, let's meditate. For those of you who are new here, you can go on to our website, Meditation with Michael Imperioli, YouTube, and the first classes of this year, mid-January 2023, have a detailed review. I think there's a more recent one, Nick, if you can send me that. A more recent class that has a detailed review. We don't do that every week because many of you are here all the time. But for those of you who just sit comfortably on the floor, it helps to be on a cushion, to have your hips above your knees. Relax. Focus on the breath. Keep your back straight but not rigid. If you focus on your breath a bit, if you need a a big blast of oxygen, take a deep breath. If not, keep it very relaxed breath, not too deep, not too shallow. If you're new, try to focus your attention we're breathing through our nose if you can. Keep your lips gently closed. Focus on where the air moves in and out. That space right underneath the nostrils above your upper lip. Focus your attention there for 3 breaths. I'll do another 3. I'll do another 3 and see what thoughts have arisen if they arise. As you're focusing your attention on the breath, if a thought has arisen, become aware of it in the next 3 breaths. And if a thought has arisen, notice the thought. Just notice what it is. Don't judge it as wrong or right or bad or good. Don't try to push it away. And don't follow the story of the thought, right? So if the thought is, your lunch engagement at 1 o'clock, don't start thinking, well, I need to leave by 11:30 and get on the train by 12 and take the B train. Just notice the thought has arisen and then go back to the breath, focusing your attention on the breath. Just notice what the thought is, that's all. Leave it where it is. 3 more breaths. Notice that you're thinking. Notice there's a thought. Go back to the breath. Or, most of you probably have done this with us. You can imagine the thought arising like a cloud. The thought is a cloud that has arisen in this limitless, clear, spacious, calm, infinite blue sky, without a mark in it, without a stain in it, without a cloud has arisen. And once you notice it, notice the thought, notice what the thought is, imagine that cloud dissipating back into that limitless, calm clarity, natural, great peace. And takes a little more attention. So if that's too hard and you're new, just go back to the breath. Focus your attention on the breath. If you do use that cloud metaphor, know that a cloud has arisen in the sky. It's not really separate from the sky. And when it dissolves back into the sky from which it came. And if the sky in our metaphor is the mind, that limitless calm, clarity, peaceful, that's the nature of our mind. The thought does not alter that. The thought does not leave a stain. The thought does not leave a mark. The thought does not harm it, does not debilitate it. In some ways, in a very, very, very rudimentary way, this is evidence of our Buddha nature. Back to the breath. The thought dissolves back into the limitless blue, stainless clarity from where it came. if you're new, you may notice that quite a bit of time goes by when you're thinking uninterruptedly before you remember or realize that you're thinking and, and applying the technique. That's okay. Don't judge that. When we first start to look at our thoughts and start to meditate, that mind could be like this really rapidly, powerfully rushing stream. But over time, through practice, we can slow that down. Don't judge that. Just, it is what it is. At the point when you realize you're thinking, leave the thought where it is. Don't rehash how many thoughts you had. Don't qualify it, quantify it, justify it, reject it. None of that. Just leave it where it is. Just notice it. And back to the breath. Excellent.
I just wanted to add for beginners or for all of us, it's very important if you're working to connect to the nature of mind, to that spaciousness where thoughts arise, the space of phenomena, experience, appearance, etc., etc. When you inhale, think you're inhaling the white, pure air of compassion, because actually the Buddhist universe is all built on wisdom and compassion. So inhaling that pure white into yourself, bring it down to your heart level, and then when you're exhaling, think you're sending the same compassion, love, light to all beings in the universe. It's a good kind of a grounding point to stay instead of like let thoughts just run wild, staying deliberately with the practice. It is a practice with, in this particular case, with the support object, because you're using breath as a support object, but at the same time you're cultivating the view that that all things out there are beautiful and permeated with Buddha nature. You inhale the Buddha nature into your heart and you exhale your own Buddha nature to the universe and you give that. So it's, in a way, it's kind of a Tonglen practice at the same time, and it'll help you anchor yourself in the practice a lot. It's also very important to do it when you meet difficult situations, difficult people, before you speak and unleash. Do a couple of these kinds of breaths, bring everything to your heart and send out the energy back in the proper form. Stay always anchored in the breath.
You can also, for a detailed review, go to Michael Imperioli Meditation. Meditation. Sorry, I always forget what this is. The YouTube channel is Meditation with Michael Imperioli, I think. I don't think that's correct. Nick, what's the YouTube channel? Sorry. Meditation with Michael Imperioli, YouTube. And look for Meditation 103, Session 60. That has a very detailed review. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so we'll go to questions. What?
103. I remember.
103, yeah. How do we start? You start by, coming here. You start by, if you want to start meditating, you start by doing it every day. And you start by making it a regular part of your daily routine. That's the best way to start. Make it, make it into something that you do very, very regularly. I am going to New York City Pride Parade today, and I hope to practice this meditation even when it gets overwhelming and crowded. What are some more subtle ways to meditate?
Exactly like this, on the breath. An opportunity when you're together with all people, some of them who you will find uh, share your views, and maybe others who are in the opposite direction. So it is the time to do Tonglen. Tonglen is taking and receiving. You take the energy of all beings and you send them the light back. That's practice. Just doing it on the breath, right there where you are. You don't need to be separated. Don't judge. Don't get carried away by thoughts of judgment. Do not react to appearances. Just stay with meditation. Just say, I'm going there to enjoy myself and also to benefit sentient beings. That's what practice is, benefiting sentient beings, all sentient beings.
Just wanted to share that I'm finally finding that I am allowing for space before I react when my kids are acting out. To be clear, they are both amazing kids with huge hearts. Just typical brother and sister nonsense comes up. But through practice, I'm finding that while I don't get it right every time, I'm reacting with much less anger and finding myself instead meeting them with compassion. Another great thing to hear.
Yeah.
You know, nothing can push our buttons like if you're a parent, like kids, or the people you're closest to. Often parents and brothers and sisters or partners. Just because we're so connected to them. We feel responsible for them. We have attachment to them as well. Um, it's like I can go work for 12 hours on a set somewhere, and you know the things that bother me or kind of annoy me, I can be very mindful about it and have some equanimity and some distance. And then when I was raising kids, which I'm not really anymore, they don't live with me, but when I would go home, a little thing could really just that one of the kids could really provoke you, um because of that proximity. So that's particularly a really good example that you brought up, and a good thing to share. Thank you.
That will also become automatic in all of your relationships, not just with kids. It's incredibly important to exercise the practice right in our immediate placement where we are, because that's also our karmic surrounding. But by doing the practice in that sometimes most challenging circumstance, that means you'll substitute the ordinary way of dealing with things and perceiving things. You'll bring that view and conduct to everything else. Of course, you'll be the first recipient of welfare, because when we're not plagued by anger and habitual afflictive responses that trigger us day and night, we are the first beneficiaries. And we are benefited and we are benefiting. So that's what conduct and view is, and I rejoice for you. It's wonderful.
This reminds me of my son's baseball game last week. The skill levels of the two teams were not well matched, and our team was winning by a significant number of runs. The parents on our team shifted gears and started cheering for the other team whenever one of their kids made a great hit or catch or even struck out one of our own players. We taught ourselves and the kids to always be cheering others on regardless of the team they are on. Yeah, that takes an awareness of someone else's feelings. Again, children, sports. You desperately want your kids to do well. You don't want them to fail. You don't want them to be humiliated. You don't want them to feel bad. But at what expense? At the expense of another kid. That's where it gets tricky. But obviously, your mind was open enough, and as were the other parents there, to take in the feelings of the other kids and the other families as well. And that takes compassion. That also takes a certain recognition of your own basic sanity. That kind of impulse is decent and sane and worthy of acting upon.
It's also a very good lesson for your children to know that they don't need to be locked in a small competitive mental space, but that they can have the generosity and freedom. Generosity is freedom when our heart is not clenched into a fist. What's in it for me? When we are more open and we connect to the openness, we're free. We can choose. We can act in a very different way, and it's a wonderful lesson for the kids, and a way to communicate things to them.
Thank you for sharing that email from one of our group. It really resonated. I work for the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, and we're currently going through a redesign of our service. Things have become very difficult, very stressful at work, including a huge increase in work demands and so on. However, I found that I've been able to respond to the ongoing situation with much more equanimity than I know I would have been able to previously. And I do attribute this to my practice, and particularly saying the 4 immeasurables before I start my day. I'm not saying I don't find it really stressful at times, but I do feel I've been able to take a much more balanced view. Yeah, again, that's, this balanced view, as you say, and being able to respond to the ongoing situation with more equanimity is because of your awareness opening, right? Your view becoming broader and wider, and not being just trapped in this bubble of the self. And that's it. That's from your work. From and the best thing is trial and error. And Buddha said that as well. Buddha didn't say this is what I've received from whoever, and this is the way it should be. Buddha said, try it and see if it works. I'm paraphrasing, but basically that's what he said. And we're not reading these things to pat ourselves on the back or proving that this class. It helps us to hear from you what's working, what part of the practice is working, what part of what we talk about here do you take with you. Are you able to practice on a daily basis, in your daily life? It's really helpful for us to know that and hear that, because then we can, structure the classes in ways that take this further, so we really appreciate the feedback. It's very, very helpful. And it's also very moving to hear that, that this is, it's not uncommon that a mahasiddha, like a yogi who's in the Buddhist tradition, that's in retreat or has meditated for many years, has some kind of almost supernatural abilities that arise through that really intensive dedication and practice. It could be psychic abilities, being able to see the future, or being able to see people's past lives, sometimes even more extreme. I won't go into, but what do you call those supernatural abilities?
But there's considered secondary abilities to enlightenment.
No, I'm asking what are some of those
Clairvoyance.
clairvoyance, things like that. But I forgot who said it, but someone said, all those things are fine and good, but liberate one negative emotion, and that's a higher CD than any of these things.
CD means accomplishment.
CD means accomplishment, which could be one of these more,
it is a huge.
It's not supernatural. What's the word? Extraordinary kind of things.
Extraordinary.
Being able to liberate one negative emotion is really basically what they're saying is the point, in a way, is much more the pith point than it is to achieve some kind of clairvoyance or something like that.
it's an extraordinary accomplishment to be able to take practice with you into all the moments. Like I said before, there's nothing small about it. It starts in a very subtle way. But what happens is that you notice your mind is not reacting in its ordinary, afflicted, me grasping, negative way, creating negative karma. When you can approach everything, and infuse everything based on the four immeasurables. That means infused on the view. You're watching, you bring the view, it changes your conduct, and it changes what the result of your world is. You've changed literally then the whole world that is going through you, because the world flows into us and we put it out there again. We breathe it in and we breathe it out. When we change the quality of that intake and out breath, it's huge. There's nothing insignificant about it. It's actually a huge accomplishment to bring awareness into everything. And little by little, every breath becomes of a different quality. It ceases to be this ordinary, dark, small, me grasping, afflicted place where the five afflictive emotions are always at play. And of course, the afflictive emotions will be expressed in thoughts. He's wrong. He's that. This is bad. Da da da. Instead, with when the afflictions are liberated and we become free, we connect to our bigger space of awareness. That means we bring the view and the conduct is right. We are liberated. We also liberate the world from these judgments that we project, and it's actually such an incredible thing. It really is practice taking root, and once it takes root, there's no going back. It'll just build and build and build on itself. This is what is in Buddhism is called the path, and the path is from ignorance to enlightenment, and everything what we're traversing in between. So nothing is small, and I rejoice for you.
The four immeasurables and my practice in general have changed my relationship with and towards my stepdaughters. My stepdaughter's mom. Sorry. Changed my relationship towards my stepdaughter's mom. It's not all roses and rainbows, but it's markedly better, in large part because I often specify her when dedicating to the benefit of all. I've found when I do that extra step, I'm much more patient and tolerant, and much more able to accept the situation for what it is and don't get stuck trying to change or control it. It's great to hear that the four immeasurables is having such a impact on a lot of you, which is it is extremely in the Buddhist practice, especially. I can only speak to Tibetan Buddhist practice because that's our that's what we practice. So, but in Tibetan Buddhist practice, practice is always three parts. And the beginning is setting the intentions and making aspirations. The second is the practice itself, which could be just sitting meditation like we do. It could be a certain visualization. It could be, a certain liturgical thing, like sadhana. What is that called? Like a scripture liturgical thing. It could be many different types of practices depending on what you're working on with your teacher. And the third part is dedicating the merit, which we do at the end of the class. But the fact that is having an impact on many of you, I think, is really important. Yeah, it's never all roses and rainbows. I don't think that's the point. The point is becoming more patient, like you say, and tolerant, and more able to accept the situation for what it is. Don't get stuck trying to change or control it. That doesn't mean, and I'm sure you're not saying that either, that you just let a bad situation fester. It means there's that prayer they say in AA and a lot of 12-step programs, the serenity prayer, and they say, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's a very good a very good prayer, I think, and seems to be exactly what you're saying here.
And also the four immeasurables, we first preset our mind. We're saying to ourselves, when I go out today, whatever I do, I will maintain this awareness regarding all things. It could also be the middle part, what Michael was talking about, the three parts. The main part, we practice on the four immeasurables. We watch our responses, that everything is filtered through the four immeasurables. And the four immeasurables are also like the end. We can also use it as a dedication as well. It could be almost a three-part teaching, setting the intention, the main work, and then the dedicating the merit to all sentient beings. Four immeasurables is a complete path. So it's an enormous kind of a practice that if we can make this as a mantra, we can think first thing in the morning, this is what I'm going to do, and we can end our day with the aspiration, this is what I have done and I will continue to do so. We really don't need to look for many more practices. This is a complete path in and of itself. If you unpack the four immeasurables, you have everything in it. And yes, what it does is it liberates negative emotions. It liberates and changes our relationship to especially difficult situations and difficult people in the world, but will ultimately change everything.
At theater, during the creative process, usually it's writers, myself, that's what this student's saying, directors and actors disagreeing, getting upset. I've become more flexible about the text, and this open-minded attitude has made me and the group more peaceful. Yeah, I mean, because that, especially like when you're collaborating like that in theater, I mean, that's something we both can speak to because we've worked in theater. It's a very collaborative process, very collaborative, creative process, and lots of egos. You're dealing with artists. And sometimes it takes that mindfulness to work for the better, of the piece. When we worked in theater, our mission really was to serve the play, not to serve me as a director or me as an actor or Victoria as a producer or a set designer. Everything and every other person is in service of the play. And that takes a certain mindfulness as well, and transcending the ego of making it about me, because I'm the artist and I'm the actor, or I'm the designer, or I'm the writer even. So this, because a lot of people ask, how does meditation or Buddhist practice affect the creative process? Well, this is a really good example of how it does. Making your mind more flexible about the collaborative process, being, like you say, Lorenzo, open-minded attitude, making the group more peaceful, which I can't imagine, do anything but make the work better, more resonant, and more dynamic.
Yeah, and that's what it means, practice at play. When we're just butting egos, everything shuts down, becomes hot and very uncomfortable, whereas being aware and opening to the spaciousness can only facilitate the creative process. There's no question about it. Practices for all kinds of behaviors, for all and every single kind of conduct. And practices is what makes it open and peaceful or harmonious, without people butting heads and egos clashing against one another. But that applies to all situations in life, and I rejoice that you bring it to work because it's very important.
Since attending your classes, I try to be a little more mindful of things like casually lying out of convenience. And last week, I carried out a very unpleasant task on my own instead of waiting for someone else to do it. I realized the task would be painful to this other person, and it was kinder to spare them the trouble. Still need to work on my negative thinking, but that's a bit compulsive in nature. Yes, well, but this decision you made to carry out an unpleasant task on your own instead of waiting for someone else to do it who the task would be painful to, the fact that you had the awareness to do that is working on your negative thinking.
Exactly.
It's an antidote to your negative thinking, thinking, coming from an impulse of compassion, an attitude of, uh, compassion and kindness.
And awareness.
And awareness, yeah. Also, casually lying out of convenience. Now, of course, being duplicitous and, lying can be something that's a very negative action. But it's not completely black and white. For instance, like if you see your mother, say, and you haven't seen her in a long time, and you see her and she looks really old since you last saw her, and really not good or something, or, in your opinion. No, you can choose to be honest and say, wow, you look like you've gotten really old and you don't look as nice as you, or you could say, boy, do you look lovely today. What do you think is more in line with the practices that we're doing? You decide that.
So, I mean, and that would really depend on the intention to benefit others or benefiting yourself. When we do things for ourselves, it's a sure go. That's not the proper conduct. Will create negativity in the future. If we're saying something for the benefit of others, as Michael said, it's not about, okay, you have to gauge moment to moment what is the right thing to say. Sometimes silence is the best. At other times, we need to uphold and help someone and give them something positive, encourage them, benefit them. And so we always base our thinking, we always ask ourselves, who is the recipient? Where is my mind looking to benefit? If it's self-grasping and for oneself, yes, avoid that, steer away. You will find that eventually you won't need to do those things. It's just a habitual pattern that needs to be shed, because it will create negative circumstances and karma, and if you're aware that it's just a habitual thing, then just shed it by becoming aware of it all the time. At the same time, as Michael said, sometimes we have to give words of encouragement that are not always so within our judgment, are so 100%, but it's more important to encourage and to benefit than anything else.
Can you talk more about being anchored in your breath? Go to the YouTube meditation with Michael Imperioli. Meditation 103 session 60 has a very detailed review that'll get really specific about that's a kind of a long conversation, but that'll get really specific about being anchored in the breath.
But I would like to address it really quickly. So we do the 9 breath purification. That's a really great practice. You could do it on the spot.
That's in that review that I just mentioned too.
You can do it on the spot. You can exhale anger through your white channel. You can exhale attachment, desire, addictions through your red channel, and ignorance, like me, through your central channel. At the same time, the very kind of a beautiful practice is inhaling the pure light into yourself, taking it into your heart center, expanding your heart center, because we can work with our ignorance that way as well as a central channel. And when we're exhaling, think I'm sending beautiful white air from my heart center to the world, to that person, or into that situation. Inhale the openness and luminosity into a difficult situation. Exhale into a difficult situation, something that's beautiful and pure. And inhale, also on inhale, remember that the universe is kind, the universe is good, everything is built out of compassion. We're here, we are alive, we have things to eat, we have things to drink, there is oxygen in our atmosphere, the sun is shining. So as much as there are a lot of difficult situations in this world, there's also at the same time all the support and the sustenance and things like that. So remembering that air, space is infused with the wisdom and luminosity of the Buddhas. We inhale it like that, pure white air, bring it to our heart center, exhale the white. And the other way to practice on the breath is the Tonglen meditation. And that is to take uh, dark air from a difficult situation, from a negative person, from something that's difficult. Inhale it into yourself, bring it to your heart center. At your heart center, you visualize this ball of luminosity, which is really your Buddha nature. And when you're exhaling, you're giving them back that purified air. You're working like an air purifier for them, diffusing the difficulty, diffusing the negativity. So those are the three ways that you can work with the breath.
Book recommendations you can find on the Solidago Productions website. What's a good way to begin a daily habit of meditating? Best times of day to meditate. I mean, morning's good because you're kind of setting the tone of your day through meditation. A good way to get in a daily habit is, think of it as something that should be a daily habit, first of all, not something that you should do whenever the thought arises. It helps if you can set a place where you do it every day, even if it's a little corner of the room or in the house, where you have your cushion. Maybe you have a little table with a candle on it, or a photograph, or a little statue, or a flower, or there's a view of something, whatever, a little place that inspires, centers you. That also helps as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you practice for beginners should not be long. Practice time should increase. So don't think of it, oh, I have to practice, I need this and this time, I don't have it, I have to walk my dog, I have to drink my coffee. Don't think of it this way. Give yourself 5 minutes before you do anything. Even before you have a cup of coffee in the morning, the energy is still very subtle. So before you go into the flood and flurry of activity, just recollect, bring your mind and your awareness into place, like the pillar of your day, like the pillar that supports everything. When you have a place where you meditate and you look at it, first of all, a bowl with water is just us being generous. A little flower is just us being generous and mindful. A picture of the Buddha, or something that inspires you, is bringing awareness. So every time you glance into that space, and do a very, very short meditation before you go into mundane and daily activities, and say the four immeasurables, vow and say, I will bring my awareness into everything. That's what meditation is. And then hopefully the meditation can permeate the rest of the day. And at night, sit before your sleep and just recall and rejoice for all the small positive actions you've done that day, and then say all the negative actions that you recall, where you say, I could have had less sharp tone with my coworker, I could have been nicer to my mother, I could have been better with my children. Vow that the next day you will do so. And that is meditation. These adjustments of our attitude, they will take us through the day and they will reset us. And then even at night, when you do that, your sleep will become much better. You will shed the difficulty by bringing it to your mind and saying, I want to discard these negative behaviors. And you can go to bed with a much more better mindset. You could do it right in your bed. You could sit for 5 minutes and just recall, rejoice for the positive, and vow that you will adjust the negative or discard the negative as much as it's possible, that you will work on it, and you can go to bed with a much better attitude instead of just slumping into bed. Go to bed with awareness. Start your day with awareness and go to bed with awareness.
I've been meditating for a little over a year. There has been many noticeable changes in body, speech, and mind. I've lost 90 pounds, all
Wow.
because of practicing mindfulness. I'm no longer a diabetic. When I began, I was in scary glucose terrain. Mentally and emotionally, the changes are more subtle. The main thing is reality unfolds in front of me, and I allow it to be as it is more often than not. I don't fight against it, and I don't demand reality match my wants, likes, and preferences.
That's practice. and our wants, likes, and practices are delusions. So, the only thing with reality is that we let it unfold, and we also notice the quality of our own presence in it and with it. And that is practice. And I rejoice for you on all the different levels. Yes, body, speech, and mind. We always have to remember, even when we sit down to meditation, the three, they call them chokes, the three postures. The posture of body, speech, and mind. We check our body. It's like a mountain. It's quiet. Does not need to be moved. We check our speech. Silence. Does not to be moved. We don't need to chat, blah, 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 filling the space. And we check our mind. Mind is spacious and capable of taking and being present with whatever arises. Out of that space of the three, we checked our body, speech, and mind. We can act in the proper way. We can bring awareness into everything. I rejoice for you. The changes you're speaking about are obviously very huge. And yes, of course, they're subtle, because that's what meditation is. It's there. Uh, afflictive, when we act on afflictions, there's so much more gross. When we become hateful, or we don't want this, or we really want this, it's very coarse, it's very big, it's very overly dramatic. Whereas awareness is very, very subtle and very fine. Awareness is like that spaciousness and luminosity that can wrap around something with a hug. Whereas, afflictive emotions are always like a big, big punch. And so, absolutely, the quality of awareness becomes much, much, much more subtle. And the fact that you're naming it is because you're very aware of how that subtle awareness moves around objects like water, and can really be all around it without trying to block it, change it, shift, move it. It's being present with things, and it is subtle. That speaks to the quality of the wind energy and the awareness energy that's coming from your heart, and it'll bring about all the changes.
Okay. Last question today. Um, you mentioned many times about being brutally honest with ourselves. How can we be brutally honest about ourselves without also feeling badly about ourselves? You know how in meditation we talk about not following the thought, the story of the thought. There's a similar relationship to that as well. You need to think of being brutally honest with yourself as the way, as your path. It's like only by seeing our defects can we transcend them or work with them. When we're blind to them, we're going to be victim to them all the time, and we're going to stay where we are. So if you, like Victoria was saying when she read the Jington Sumgan, there's no need to look for a view elsewhere, right? I have now understood the undistracted ordinary mind to be meditation. There's no need to look for experience elsewhere. I have now understood my own mind that I have never parted from to be the Buddha. I have now understood the unceasing stream of thoughts to be primordial awareness. So, these thoughts, being brutally honest and seeing, the thought of actually seeing these defects, of seeing what you're doing, being honest, what your true motivation is, that is the path in itself. So if you look at it, when these thoughts come up and when you're faced with it, if you look at it as that is my path, rather than, wow, I'm so bad, you're taking this extra step by adding this layer of judgment that it's bad or good. That's just habitual. So you're kind of doing this rewiring thing by saying, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what needs to change. Now I know, and here's my practice.
Exactly, just what Michael said, because judgment is another being hijacked away by ordinary afflicted habitual mind. You're just layering another thought on top of a series of thoughts, constructs of thoughts. So instead of judging, you look at something where you behave or habitually or in this particular situation in a negative way, and instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so bad," and going further into the afflictive mind and allowing that to take over, you're opening the space of awareness, and then you're saying, "Okay," because remember, you're not all those little arisings and occurrences of where you're bad, you're small, you didn't understand this, you didn't behave the right way. We're that too. That's a relative. Uh, that's a relative portion of being. And then there is the absolute nature, which is that spacious luminosity. Within the spacious luminosity, you connect to that and you say, instead of judging, you say, okay, I am going to work with this by not letting it be my constant way of being. I'm not going to be driven in this car day and night. Next time, I'm going to have awareness. I'm going to walk. I'm not going to be hijacked. I'm going to walk. I'm going to slow down, and I'm going to try to decrease that balloon. I'm going to take air out of it, and I'm going to be on the space of awareness rather than be constantly hijacked by my afflictive emotions. And that's what practice is. Practice is not adding another afflictive thing into the same bag, into the same balloon, It's like deflating the balloon until awareness becomes the dominant field, and connecting to the spacious nature of our mind, connecting to the luminous nature of our mind, and simply being able to be with things without judging them, and making aspiration to let me lessen this habitual behavior. Let me not say these negative things. Let me have more space of awareness, and let me start to be kind and aware of others. That's why we use the four immeasurables as like a practice, and not just the setting of the mind, but as a practice and as a fruition. Use the four immeasurables before you walk into situations that will trigger you. Say the four immeasurables, set your mind, and then see how it affects you little by little. Expect that the changes will be subtle, but there will be changes if you're actually making effort. There cannot be effort without wanting to change.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your participation today. If there's anything that you really wanted to get feedback on and you didn't, meditation with Michael Imperioli. No, I can't remember the email. Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 at Gmail. You can write in questions, but thank you for your participation today. Thanks for being here, and thanks to Nick Solidio, our producer, without whom this would not be possible. And let's close by dedicating the merit from today's session for the benefit of all beings, as we do every week. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. See you next week.
Practice. I rejoice.